Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Sanctuary. Pull your deck chair up, have a rest. We have got an incredible guest for you today. I'm joined by Evan Brown. You may know him as the host of Dynasty Bates. You may know him as a writer and ranker over at Dynasty Nerds. NFL storylines you can't ignore. That's the topic we're going to talk to you today. This is basically an off-season look ahead. What are we going to be talking about? What are we going to be looking about over the coming months? The biggest thing, the thing that, we're not going to talk rookies quite yet. That's down the road. But we're going to talk about vets. We're going to look at free agents. Let's start with the glam position, Evan. Free agent quarterbacks. Okay. I've spent the last 25 years being hurt, being disappointed by Tom Brady. I spent a lot of time prepping for this show. I put Tom Brady on my free agent quarterbacks list. He announced his retirement about an hour ago. What can I do? Okay.
One last turn of the knife.
Yeah, just, as a Jets fan, he didn't get enough of torturing me week in, week out, twice a year. He now has to do it again. But is there any free agent quarterbacks? We've got a few on the screen there. Anybody that you particularly interested in, you think could potentially see a change in landing spot in where they're playing the football next year?
Honestly, guy that I'm really interested in is actually Daniel Jones. And that sounds weird saying that, right? Because he's had such a weird start to his career. But do you know what really made me think about this is the saga of Jared Goff. Join me as we discuss the saga of Jared Goff. Jared Goff, I thought there was a couple of players this year, Jared Goff being the most prominent one, that I thought, man, we really missed as a community. We really missed on a couple of these players that if you had paid attention, if you had dug in and done your homework and had a more confident take on some of these players, you could have made such a massive ROI, right? And in Dynasty, that's such a huge part of the game, is being able to buy low and then sell high. Jared Goff's one of those guys that last year, I remember in the offseason, you couldn't pay people to take him off your roster. He just was like, nobody wanted him. Nobody was interested in him. And yet he was the QB 10 on the year. Do you know what I mean? So if you were able to pick him up for like a third round pick in a super flex league or something like that, and then you have basically what turned out to be a reliable QB2 all year, that just gives you so much maneuverability. So I was sort of thinking about this, and Daniel Jones going into the 2023 season is going to be in a pretty similar situation to what Jared Goff was in going into the 2022 season. An interesting offense, a head coach that's making some moves, making some changes, an offense that's on its way up. People haven't really caught up with that yet. And I'm all about, I want to get on the front foot of these trends. I want to make some really nice moves in the offseason if possible.
I said this on when we were doing our team previews. If Daniel Jones was under contract for the next 4 years and I knew that the Giants were buying into him, he'd be my Dynasty QB 12 right now. I'd have him in a tier with Tua and that would be it. Because I think when he's on the field, he's going to be great. My issue is that I don't know if the Giants are going to commit to him. And look, there's been all sorts of talk about the Giants might franchise him and stuff like that. I'm sorry. The running back franchise tag is 10 million. We're going to come on to this in a bit. I can't see how they can't franchise tag Saquon Barkley. That means that they've got kind of three options with Daniel Jones. They either need to pay him long term, they pay him on like a 2-year prove it deal, or they let him walk. To me, I think it's that middle option. And I just don't believe, I say this quite a lot. I believe that every GM and every head coach basically gets one go at committing to a franchise quarterback. And I just don't know, as good as he was this last year, as good as the Giants were and overproduced on expectations, when it got to the playoffs, we saw there wasn't really enough juice to get him there. And I just don't know if Brian Daboll is going to say, I'm putting all my eggs in the Daniel Jones basket. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see a 3-year contract where he's getting paid 25-30 million, of which 40-50 million is guaranteed. So it's kind of a year and a half, 2 years that they commit to him. So it's like, yeah, we're going to give you some money. You've done well, but we've got a very soon out if we can find an alternative, if we can get, a draft pick or trade up in the draft and go and get the long-term answer, because I just don't believe that they think Daniel Jones is the long-term answer.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I agreed to for the most part, I agree with what you're saying because I'm not suggesting. And I guess what the nice part is, the reason I'm excited about Daniel Jones and I'm highlighting him is because I don't think you need to break the bank. That's the point. Is that especially, and again, this is a super flex conversation. I'm just gonna
Yeah,
be
absolutely.
clarifying that in case I didn't say that already. Like, this is a super flex conversation. Most of my leagues these days are super flex, and honestly, the QB landscape is kind of gross. It's sort of becoming what the tight end landscape was for years. Where there's like a couple of really great options, then there's a bunch of like, if you squint hard enough, you can make it look okay, and that's why to me, somebody like Daniel Jones, like I think that we, 5 years ago, we liked to talk about, let's, you lock up this QB because that's going to be your QB for 10 years. And it's like, dude, there's not a lot of QBs that I feel confident saying for the next 10 years is going to be my QB on my dynasty roster. You know what I mean? Like there's probably 4 or 5 of them and that's about it. And so
Yeah.
I think that we need to start we have to look at these like 2 to 3 year windows really. And, if you're sitting there and you're a contender-ish, you've got a late first-round pick. If you've still held on to your first-round pick, you're probably not getting a solid QB in this draft at, 110, 111, 112. But if you can go and turn that 111, 112 into Daniel Jones and have yourself another QB, maybe your third QB or fourth QB on your team, really give yourself some depth and be ready for a push next year. I mean, most money leagues, you win once and that pays your next 4 or 5 years of league fees and things like that. So I think for me, that's kind of some of the reasons it's risk reward. There's a bunch of rubbish QB play at the minute. Like there's honestly like half the league would love an upgrade at QB.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even if he doesn't cut it in the Giants, he may cut it somewhere else. You know what I mean? If he continues to improve.
100%. I think that's, I've literally sitting here listening to you. I've had like an epiphany because I've preached for the last 3 years that QB age is overvalued, and people are obsessing over going out and getting the rookie, the unproven. Last year Zach Wilson was going in ADP ahead of Aaron Rodgers, which I was sitting here. Okay, Aaron Rodgers didn't have a good year, but I can guarantee you'd rather have Aaron Rodgers in a dynasty league than Zach Wilson right now. And Daniel Jones is in that exact scenario. I'm sitting here saying, oh, I don't know if I can value Daniel Jones because the Giants haven't committed to him. He might lose his job in 2 years. Well, actually, he's undervalued. I only need him 2 years. Any of these rookies coming out might lose their job in 2 years, as Zach Wilson has just shown. So actually, you've hit the nail on the head, and I'm kicking myself that I've not thought of this sooner. People like
well, that's what happens. You listen to me and you have epiphanies. That's what happens. No, but I agree with you. You're right, and that's the point, isn't it? It's like, we miss so much, especially when it comes to QB evaluation. It's a hard thing to get right. Like even the guys who get paid lots and lots of money get it wrong all the time. And honestly, like as much as we would love to see Trey Lance smash, like we don't know that's going to happen. We don't know Trey Lance is going to ever really make it. We don't think that Zach Wilson is going to make it at this stage. Like we're looking at like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence really, out of that class. And that was supposed to be a really strong class. So, I mean, this class coming up, like we're thinking what Stroud and Young, maybe Anthony Richardson has like the legs to make something happen. Maybe Will Levis could be another Josh Allen. If we can squint and try and make things happen. But I mean, the odds are you're not even going to get 4 QBs out of this next class that are going to be really solid contributors to your fantasy rosters and Superflex. So yeah, exactly. I think you've nailed it. Guys like Goff are still undervalued, but Daniel Jones, give me Daniel Jones, give me Vanilla Vic, give me somebody who can give me that rushing upside, but I'm not having to pay Lamar Jackson prices.
Exactly that. And you touched on Lamar Jackson. We'll quickly come back to these last two. Lamar Jackson, I don't know if you agree with me, Evan. I basically am not talking about him as a free agent because as far as I'm concerned, the Ravens are either signing him long-term or tagging him. There's no other scenario. Do you agree?
You would think so. You would think so, but the only thing I guess that is it just was such an unfortunate sort of way that the season played out for both parties, I think, because for him, he was sort of betting on himself and he's like, until you give me that really big number, I'm not accepting anything less. Now, Lamar sort of strikes me as the type of player that's not going to really back down on that. Do you know what I mean? So yes, they
Yeah,
might
100%.
franchise tag him, but again, it leaves you in that sort of situation where you're like, well, what do we do with this? You know, he's been beat up the last couple of years. We hope that he's back to full fitness and everything's ready to rock. But yeah, he's a really tricky one because you're sort of like, well, what's going to happen? Because from what all the signals are that the Ravens aren't willing to give him this huge, massive, guaranteed bumper contract that he wants. And so you're sort of like, well, what happens here? How does this play out? You know what I mean? I think you're right. He probably is back next year, whether it be on the franchise tag or whether they work something out. But it is a bit freaky.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that a lot has been made at the end of the season. I think that it's, let's take some time. They'll sit back, they'll relax, and they'll say, actually, the best thing for us is keeping Lamar around. And I think he's going to
I
get
think,
franchise tag.
I think you're right. I think the best thing would be just to tie him down to a big contract because they've sort of tried to build their offense around him. They've tried to like kind of create a Lamar. So like to go out and get another quarterback, they're going to have to almost start from scratch again, and build around that person's strengths maybe more. So yeah, it would make the most sense, but it's just whether or not they can do it, with the cap and whether they want to do it, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly that. So the final one, Jimmy G, we don't have to go into any great detail. I've run through QB landscape. I think there's 8 legitimate week 1 starting spots available. That's not counting Arizona because I'm counting Kyler. I know he's probably not going to start week 1. I've got Jimmy G as my 7th best available quarterback. That's me basically saying I think Jimmy G is going to start somewhere next year. I don't know where it is. If anyone knows, probably go and put some money on it because you know a lot more than I do. But I think he's massively undervalued in terms of dynasty circles right now. And I think that because he doesn't have a landing spot, because we know he's probably not going to be around in San Francisco, you can probably go and sneakily grab him away whilst people are thinking, oh, he's not a starting quarterback, because in 2 months' time, I think he's going to be a starting quarterback.
Yeah, for me, he's very much just like price dependent. It's like I think if you can get him, for a really cheap deal in a super flex league, yeah, that it's always worth it to get somebody that speculatively could be a starting quarterback. That's just a general, like last year, for example, I had a team that league that I was talking about where I traded away Goff. He was like my QB 4 or 5, because I don't always do it, but in an ideal world, I like to really have 4 or 5 quarterbacks in a super flex league. It just is a nice luxury to have. And in that league, he was QB 4 or 5, something like that. Traded him away, and then whoever had Geno Smith last year basically was just like willing to take a mid-second round pick for him. And I was like, I don't even need Geno Smith, but a starting quarterback who is like doing well and probably is going to be a starting quarterback next year for a 2nd round pick, I have to do it. You know what I mean? Like I felt like compelled to do it. So that's the way I look at it with Jimmy G is like, yeah, like if somebody's going to take a late 2nd round pick for him, you know what I mean? Because they just don't believe in him or they're just like, whatever, he's a bum. Then yeah, absolutely. But as far as like, I'm not giving away a first for him or I'm not giving away like a first plus for him or anything, because I don't think there's really a ceiling there. I think for me personally, the way I interpret it, that San Francisco offense is like a dream for a quarterback. Like Brock Purdy, I do think I kind of come down right in the middle of this whole Brock Purdy argument. I don't think he was like the second coming of Tom Brady. I don't think he was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. But at the same time, I don't think he's just a bum off the street and anybody could do what he did. I think he's talented. I think he did a lot better than people expected. But I do think that San Francisco scheme, the talent that they have on offense is a dream for quarterbacks like him to work with. And so I don't know that Jimmy G would be as fantasy relevant in other schemes where maybe there's not as much, cutting edge sort of like if he ends up, say, for example, in Houston for whatever reason, they say they go a different direction. They decide not to take a franchise quarterback because they're loading up on defense or whatever it is because they got D'Amico Ryans and then, he's familiar with Jimmy G and he brings Jimmy G over, that kind of thing. If that happens, I don't think he's a top 12 quarterback this year. You know what I mean? I think he's
not.
Mid to low end QB2. So it's like, well, why are you going to be throwing multiple firsts at a like mid to low end QB2? So for me, it's very much price dependent, but I do agree with you that anybody who you think can, get a deal on that you believe will be a starting quarterback next year. That's why I was in on Davis Mills last year is because he was so cheap and a part of the offseason. And I was like, okay, I think he will be the starting quarterback. And he was. And if he does take that step forward, then it's a massive all right. He didn't take the step forward, but at the same time, the investment was like a mid to late 2nd round pick a lot of the offseason. So it wasn't this big, massive investment. And when you look at the quarterback class that you had last year, you weren't any worse off taking a shot on Davis Mills than you were taking a shot on Malik Willis or whatever,
Yeah. And I think you know, the price at the moment, Jimmy G's QB 26 in DLF ADP. Like, you're not even, if he is a back end QB2, he's overproducing his current price, isn't he?